Merry Christmas, troglodytes. Today I have a very special tale to tell you of two guitars. Let's dig in. Now, before we go too far in depth with the story of each of these instruments, I thought we would first just take a look at them before we know their full history, because this will truly be a heartwarming story that'll make you feel good on this special day. So let's start with our first one here. This is an absolutely stunning example of a 70s Les Paul standard. Both of these actually came from 1977. So looking at this thing, there's a few things that makes this standard quite fantastic. We have a beautiful top on this thing. Not only does it have a whole bunch of figuring, but it has some crazy wood grain. To give you a frame of reference, this is what most 77 Les Paul standards look like. Plain top with not much going on, multiple pieces making them up, and clownbursty-like finishes. However, when you switch back over to this one, that's when you realize this is a one-piece top in the Norlin era. That's just unheard of. Like, this is the era where you rarely even find a two-piece top, so to find one that is a one-piecer is truly magnificent. That's not even something that Gibson does a lot today. But you'll also notice, hey, this does not have a pick guard on it. And it's not like this one where the pick guard was just taken off. I mean, you can see the outline of it right there, screw holes and all. But this bad boy doesn't even have that hole, which means it left the factory without it and with black plastic stock. Okay, so is this like some sort of a prehistoric reissue early one? Because we've got the prehistoric case right here. No, it's still a Nashville style bridge and everything else is just built to regular Les Paul specs at this point in time. But this thing is just truly magnificent and it's aged so well. It's got a nice yellowed patina to it and it's been well maintained and cared for through the years. It looks like it might have even came stock from the factory with a brass nut. How cool is that? And a standard truss rod cover. But here's another unique feature about this particular Les Paul standard. It has an ebony fretboard. That's not just a dark rosewood, and this didn't start life as a Pro Deluxe and got converted to standard specs. That is something else that makes this one very fantastic. The serial number of this one dates it to late 1977, the 353rd day of the year, and believe it or not, this was made in Nashville. Usually when you find a crazy one-piece top or even a two-piece top, heavily flame-figured stuff, more often than not, it was a Kalamazoo build. But as you can see here on the headstock, we've got some incredible flame figuring going on. So let's see the rest of that neck. Oh yeah, that's really good for a 77 from the Nashville plant. There must be a really good story behind this guitar, right? Now, do we have any crazy flamed mahogany back with incredible wood grain? Maybe not necessarily as fancy as the rest of this guitar, but it's still a nice back. But now let's take a second to look at this other one here. So this, very similar to that last one, is a one-piece top. However, this time it is a Les Paul Deluxe with the mini humbuckers. It also came stock from the factory without a pick guard, but we've got the cream plastics this time, so that's not necessarily special. But hey, look at this, we've got the 80s prehistoric style knobs. Now, unfortunately, our fretboard on this one is still rosewood, so maybe not quite as special as that other one once again, but hey, look, another brass nut, straight up deluxe truss rod cover on here, and the lacquer also has a very nice yellowed hue to it. This one also dates to late 1977, 39 days apart from that other one. The top might not have quite as crazy wood grainage, but at least it has some rings and some insane flame quilting patterns too. And the back of this one, very similar to that last, but this appears to have been played a little bit more than that other one. No crazy flame figuring on the neck, maybe a little bit, but what is the story behind these two one-piece tops? Well, do you guys remember these two? Randy Leonard and Floyd Leonard, the father-son team that worked at Gibson in various parts of production throughout the years. Even if you're not familiar with their names, if you're into late 70s, early 80s Gibson guitars, you might have seen their initials inside of your instruments. If you're really lucky, both of them in the same guitar. We're talking these things right here. RFL, that's the son, and then FL, that's the father. These were two special guitars custom ordered by one of each of them, and I thought it was very pertinent to document Randy's story with these guitars, so I hope you enjoy. His father started working for Gibson in the year 1975. He was a lifelong musician and a Gibson guitar player. He was very excited to have the opportunity to purchase instruments direct from the factory because that was a perk that they gave employees at that time. Their policy allowed them to purchase one instrument per year for a special price. So after he hit his first year in 1976, he purchased a Cherry ES335 TD from the Kalamazoo plant. However, his son, Randy, started to work for Gibson in December of 1977. So at that point, his father was getting ready to purchase his second guitar. But this time, instead of a semi-hollow, he wanted some sort of a Les Paul. Now you gotta remember, at this point in time, 1977, the standards have just been back for a couple of years. There were still deluxe as well as customs. So he was trying to decide what he should do. But as fate would have it, sometime in the fall of 1977, Gibson received an abnormally wide piece of maple, big enough on one end that they were able to make not one, not two, but 3 one-piece tops to fit on a Les Paul. That's a wide piece of maple. So the first top was run through as a Les Paul Deluxe. After buffing it up, doing the whole neck prep process, the entire guitar was never actually finished for assembly, and the management took it and hung it on their wall inside the production office. So when Randy joined Gibson in that December, he saw that there, during the hiring process. When he was working in the plant in general, he would see that thing hanging there. But his father had his eyes on that guitar, and he was going to think about trying to buy it from them as his employee discount guitar for that year. However, the more and more he thought about it, he's like, I really don't want the mini humbuckers. I want something with the new super humbucking pickups. Which, if I'm interpreting the story correctly, I believe that refers to the Tarbacks, the Series 7 style ones. I believe they were also called super humbuckings at the time. So instead of going after that one that had the wrong pickups for him, he went to see his buddies in the back of the plant that had the 2 other bodies with the really cool tops that were stashed under their workbench. And he chose the best out of those 2. And from his own personal private stash, he got some nice curly maple for the neck and topped it off with that ebony fretboard that we were talking about. So whenever you hear stories about Gibson employees hiding certain things back for themselves, yes, there is some merit to that. So what guitar are we talking about? Obviously, the Les Paul Standard with the black plastics and that awesome neck that you've been seeing here. That's how that guitar came to life. But here's another interesting story. Take a look at the tuners on this thing. That is the Gibson Schaller branded ones. And he actually had his son install them on that exact guitar because that was his job at that time, installing the tuners. But he gave him strict orders. He has to use the custom Schaller Deluxe tuners on these. And I can tell you guys yet today, those tuners are fantastic. They've held up well, even, some 50 years later. But shortly after that Standard actually finally got finished and he got to bring it home, it was Randy's turn to do his own custom order. So after begging and pleading the production managers to sell him the Deluxe that he's been looking at this entire time, he finally got to buy the Deluxe. Now, unfortunately, he wasn't able to get a crazily flamed neck or change up the fretboard into ebony or whatever else he wanted because, well, it had already been run through the process. It was completed to the point where the neck was on it, the top was on a body. It was a complete Les Paul, but it didn't have any of the parts on it at that point in time. It was just kind of a beautiful display piece. So after some discussions with management, he was able to buy it in March of 1978. However, it wasn't easy to get them to sell that thing because there was another employee who had dibs on it. But thankfully, he decided to let it go to Randy because he knew that his father had the other one and, whole family tree heritage here that we're talking about here 30 some years later. Now you might be curious, how much of a discount did these guys actually get? What was the out the door price with a case? Well, Randy still actually has his Gibson receipt right here. You can see March of 1978, the 23rd. Randy Leonard right there. Legendary name. Les Paul Deluxe Natural. Matching serial number $349.50. But they still had to pay 6% sales tax. And he got a shop-worn case, so essentially used, for only $25. So his total was just slightly under $400 at $395.47. Even rounding up to $400 and adjusting for inflation, that's only like $1,700. Fantastic deal. But here's where the deal got even sweeter. He had a down payment of $100 to put on it and some change to make it even, and then they let him pay the rest off through his wages. That's what you can see here on employee payroll deduction. So $100 down and $30 a week for 10 weeks to pay it off. So he didn't have to front all that money. They just took it out of his paycheck. That's pretty cool. And the fact that he still has the receipt is awesome. Now, I could be wrong, but I believe they're around, $800 retail, maybe $650, $800, I'm not sure. So that's a pretty good deal. What do I think this guitar is worth today? With a story like that, I'm sure you could easily find somebody that'd pay 10 grand for it. As a set, maybe even more, because the Leonard family has kind of started to go down in history as really cool dudes from the late 70s, early 80s. So now, fast forward to today, unfortunately his father is no longer with us, and he's now inherited his guitar. So now he has two 1977 natural Les Pauls with one-piece tops, which were cut from the very same board, thus came from the very same tree. This is the family tree Les Pauls, as I would like to call them. I mean, have you guys ever heard of anybody else who could make that claim? Two Les Pauls, father and son, all cut from the same tree, stuff like that. Yeah, that is just too good of a story. Now, Randy's wish is to keep these two guitars together as a set and hand them down to his son and grandson in remembrance of him and his father's time at Gibson. But let's just say, if they don't have the same love and enthusiasm for Gibson Les Pauls, I will gladly purchase these and keep them together and display them in my future museum for all to see, if it has to come down to that. But I hope they can stay in their family for a long time. But I wanted to document these two guitars. That way us guitar-loving enthusiasts would at least be able to see them and know the true story behind them. Because one-piece top Gibsons, they're very uncommon. But I'm sure you're wondering, what happened to the third one? I can only hope and pray that it became a Les Paul Custom, because then you would have what I was just telling you earlier. You had the Deluxe, you had the Standard, and you had the Custom. I mean, you can kind of mix the Pro Deluxe in with the ebony fretboard Standard, so that even kind of works out too. Unfortunately, I don't believe it's surfaced, but I'm sure somebody has it somewhere, or who knows, maybe that guitar never even got finished. But I do have a picture of a 1979 that has a one-piece top. Now granted, it's a nice flame top, but it doesn't have any of the wood grains of the family tree Les Pauls. So I guess if you ever see another 1977 Les Paul that has incredible wood grain and flame figuring, as you've seen in this episode, it definitely belongs to that set, and I feel like it should go to Randy and his family. But this particular one right here is from 1979. So occasionally, I guess Gibson would get some really wide wood that they would use for a one-piece top guitar, but generally they would be done for special occasions. So troglodytes, what do you think? If it's going to stay in the family, do you want me to borrow these for a little bit and do a normal review and demo of these with Randy? Because that might be something that is possible that we could do in the year 2022. Now, obviously, Randy, having all of his ledgers of the guitars that he was a part of later on, and his father's tales and stories, they have a whole bunch of cool custom order guitars and limited edition runs. So I hope to be able to cover a few more of those on the show, as well as review a few that he personally still owns. Like, what about the very first Les Paul Supreme? Or the Paul that's a little bit different from every single one that we've ever known. Alright, troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed the Christmas special this year. I hope you leave this episode with heartwarming feelings, and have a great day. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care.